Dad, raise your glass. We want to celebrate that you finally accepted the truth. You are nothing. Laughter burst through my small kitchen where the smell of gumbo still clung to candle smoke and old memories. My oldest son said it while leaning back in his chair, swirling his wine like a smug executive. The middle one chimed in. Now you don't have to worry about investing anymore, Dad. We've got it handled. The youngest snickered, as long as you know how to stay quiet. The whole table cracked up. The people I once called family now looked at me like a pathetic joke. I said nothing. I lowered my eyes, set my wine glass on the yellowed wedding napkin, smiled, and unlocked my old phone. Record mode on. Under the table, my finger touched the tiny safe key on the chain around my neck, the one that opens the vault they don't know exists. Tonight, they think they buried a poor old father, but maybe they just woke up a boss. If you're still here, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more hearts, and if it moved you, give it a like so others can find it too. My name is Langston Cole, 68, born and raised in Houston, Texas. My life has smelled like motor oil, blueprints, and the heat of southern job sites. I started from nothing, just calloused hands, a practical mind, and a promise to my late wife. One day, I'll build something stronger than poverty. For the last 20 years, to the outside world, I've been a widower in a small north side house, driving an old pickup, living off my schoolteacher wife's pension. But behind that ordinary face, I'm the founder of Northbridge Holdings, the firm that controls dozens of subsidiaries including Crownstone Group, where my 3 sons work. I hid who I was not so I could brag later, but to see whether my children's love and respect could survive without money. And now I have my answer. That night, Houston was heavy with rain. I got up at 5 a.m. to cook a celebration dinner for the whole family gumbo, the way I always make it for special occasions. My little kitchen filled with garlic, onions, black pepper, and smoked sausage. I laid out the hand-stitched napkin my wife Clara gave me on our wedding day across the old oak table. Next to it, the crystal glasses I only bring out when it truly matters. Tonight, I thought, was worth celebrating. All 3 of my sons had been promoted. Darius, the oldest, had just been named regional director at Crownstone Group, a major real estate company in Houston. Marcus, the middle one, became head accountant, and Elliot, the youngest, was invited onto the core legal team. I used to think nothing could make a father prouder than that moment. I used to think so. When the doorbell rang, I wiped my hands on the apron and went to greet them. Darius came first, white dress shirt, a slight paunch, a Tag Heuer flashing on his wrist. He gave me a quick hug, the kind you give when your mind is somewhere else. Wow, Dad, you went big. With this table, I thought I walked into a restaurant. I smiled. It's just gumbo, and son, the old dish you boys like. Yeah, when we were kids, Dad. Tastes change. He glanced around like he was appraising the old kitchen. Marcus and Elliot arrived with their wives and kids. My daughters-in-law floated in on air kisses and expensive perfume, laying gifts on the table like they'd come to a client event. The grandkids kept their heads in their phones and didn't bother to look up when I called their names. Still, I smiled. I told myself, as long as they came, we're still a family. Dinner started. I poured wine, served bowls of gumbo, and asked about their work. Darius talked up a new retail complex. Marcus bragged about a finance project, and Elliot said his boss praised him. I listened carefully, asking small questions, trying to understand more. In my heart, I was truly proud, at least until Darius stood up. He held his glass and cleared his throat. Dad, we want to raise a glass tonight because at last you've accepted the truth. You're nothing. For a second, I thought I misheard. Then laughter popped like corks around the kitchen. Marcus bent over the table. Elliot slapped his brother's hand. The daughters-in-law feigned shock and then giggled. Remember last year, Dad? Marcus said. You told Darius not to buy that midtown condo because it was overpriced. It's doubled now. Or when you taught us safe investing, Elliot added, smirking. If we'd listened, we'd still be penny pinching on a pension. More laughter. I sat there, gripping my spoon. In that moment, I heard my old teacher's voice, the one who told 12-year-old me, Langston Cole, poor black boys like you shouldn't dream of being anybody. I spent my life proving him wrong. 60 years later, my own sons repeated his words in the house I built. I didn't react. I lifted a spoonful of cold gumbo and chewed. The black pepper and chili tasted like iron on my tongue. While they joked, I unlocked my phone, started recording, and set it face down on the table. I knew this wasn't just ingratitude, it was the truth about the sons I raised. Dinner dragged on another half hour. Darius talked about his new project. Marcus and Elliot competed over who had the better connections. No one asked how I've been. When we finished, I stood to clear the table. "Leave it, Dad, we'll wash," Elliot said, half-hearted. "It's okay," I answered. "I'm used to it." I stacked plates in the sink. Under the water's rush, I heard Darius whisper to Marcus, "Honestly, poor old man. Thinks he understands life." Marcus chuckled. "At least now he knows to keep quiet." I shut off the faucet and straightened up. In the cabinet glass, my face looked old but not weak. I saw the man who built an empire none of them had ever noticed. When they left, I walked them to the door. "Thanks, Dad," Darius said, patting my shoulder like a supervisor. "Great meal." "Yeah, really good," Marcus added. "I'm glad you liked it," I said. "Drive safe." As the engine noise faded, the house fell still. I sat at the table, staring at the half-eaten gumbo and the red wine catching the light. I replayed the recording and listened to their laughter spill out of the phone speaker. I wasn't angry. I was clear. Clear that I'd raised 3 successful men, not 3 respectful ones. Clear that I'd taught them how to make money, but never the limits of arrogance. Clear that if I did nothing, they'd keep treating me like a worn-out object in this house. I took off the silver chain at my neck and slid out the small key, the one for the vault under the shed floor. Down there were Clara's keepsakes and the files for Northbridge Holdings, the parent company of Crownstone Group. I clenched the key and sighed. They think they just insulted a poor old man and forgot their father is the one signing all 3 paychecks. I turned off the kitchen light, leaving only the candles flickering. A ribbon of red wine bled across the wedding napkin. I texted Julian Ward, my lawyer and the only person who knows my 2 lives. "See you at the office tomorrow. Time to open the family audit." Then I poured myself another glass, raised it, and smiled. "Congratulations, boys. Tonight's celebration is your first sentence." I didn't sleep. Rain tapped the tin roof in time with the quiet tick of the wall clock. I sat in my small office lit by a single desk lamp reflecting off the old oak. In front of me, our wedding photo Ariel, the only person who ever truly knew me. "You were right," I whispered to the picture. "I've spoiled them with silence for too long." To everyone else, I was a widower living on my late wife's small pension. I drove an old Ford F-150, dark rust on the body, cracked leather seats. At the grocery store, I'd joke with neighbors. "With gas prices like this, I'll have to pedal a bike tomorrow." They'd laugh and think I was a gentle, simple old man with nothing but memories. My clothes were Walmart bargains. A $12 shirt, faded khakis, Timberlands worn down to a crooked heel. My house sat in a working-class neighborhood, white paint peeling, a wooden fence that creaked in the wind. The perfect picture of lonely Mr. Langston, an old man living on yesterday. But that's just the face in the front of the mirror. Behind the chipped paint and tired smiles was another truth. I'm the chairman of Northbridge Holdings, a real estate and infrastructure portfolio worth more than $60 million, and no one, not even my sons, knows it. I started the company nearly 40 years ago with one roof repair contract and a small bank loan. I once mortgaged our first house to buy a strip of riverfront that became Northbridge Plaza. I've always seen value where others saw trash, and that carried me through 3 recessions. But when Ariel died of cancer, I changed. The house turned cavernous. I stood in the kitchen for hours, listening for her laugh in my memory. Before she passed, she held my hand, voice faint but firm. "Langston, don't let money turn our sons into men who forget where they came from." I promised. After the funeral, I sold the Cadillac and moved to a working-class block. I stopped dressing up, stopped attending shareholder meetings, stopped appearing in the news. I handed day-to-day operations to Julian Ward, my partner and friend of more than 20 years. He's the only one who knows the truth. He calls me the invisible power. I didn't hide to test my sons. I wanted them to become real men, not carried by money or my name. When Darius, Marcus, and Elliot graduated, they applied like everyone else. I didn't intervene when Darius got rejected by 3 firms. I watched from afar through HR Reports Crownstone, a Northbridge subsidiary sent to headquarters. All 3 were hired on merit. They worked hard, hungry, disciplined. I was proud reading the first monthly summary. All 3 Coles at 120% productivity. I poured bourbon and told the photo, "Ariel, our boys are doing well." But like most things, success made them blind. As titles rose, their language shifted. "This company owes me opportunities. You have to know how to play to win. Money doesn't come from hard work, Dad, it comes from position." At first, I saw it in internal emails. Over time, it became who they were. I used to think love meant enduring, that a parent's love should be quiet, asking nothing back. I let them laugh at what I cherished: the watch my wife left, an old dish, a simple life. I thought I was keeping the peace, but that dinner woke me up. I saw clearly. Respect had vanished, replaced by obligation. They came not to see their father, but to prove they were above him. And I knew, if I didn't teach the right lesson, I'd lose myself for good. I drew the curtain and looked out. The rain hadn't stopped. Streetlights bounced off the glass, and my face looked back older, but the eyes still sharp. I called Julian. His voice was hoarse. He was still at the office. "Langston, it's been a while since you called this late. Time to activate the emergency plan." Silence. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. I want to see what my sons are doing at Crownstone." He exhaled. "Understood. I'll prepare full reports, finance and HR. Morning delivery." "No. 3 days." "3 days?" "I want to see it with my own eyes first. I have 72 hours. I hung up. The desk lamp lit our wedding photo. I ran a finger along the frame. "I kept your promise for 20 years, I said softly. "Now I need to keep one to myself." I pulled a folder labeled Northbridge Confidential, Legacy Plan. Every time I looked at it, I remembered I'd built this empire and never used it to defend the one thing that mattered, my dignity. Houston felt strangely quiet. The clock struck 12. I wrote in my notebook, 72-hour plan. 1. Confirm Crownstone ownership structure. 2. Match HR files for the 3 sons. 3. Pull operating finance data. 4. Check internal reports for the last 3 years. 5. Prepare father-son's file evidence for Judgment Day. I closed the notebook and turned off the light, but my eyes stayed open in the dark. Part of me, the father, hurt. The other part, the founder of Northbridge, was waking up. I knew that when the sun rose 3 times, my sons wouldn't be looking at an old man in discount clothes driving a beat-up truck. They'd see the man they forgot, Langston Cole, the one who taught Houston how to build, and who will now teach his own sons how to keep their honor. 3 days. 3 days to gather the truth. 3 days to do what a real father does not protect but awaken. 3 days. After that fateful dinner, My phone rang at noon on Sunday. Darius's name lit up. I sat on the cracked leather chair, staring at the screen before answering. "Are you free, Dad?" His voice was gentle and distant. "Kind of. I want to talk about your future." I smiled slightly. My future sounded like an investment pitch. "Fine," I said. "When and where?" "This evening, 6 p.m. at my apartment. I want the whole family to have a serious talk." When he hung up, I sat still, drumming my fingers on the armrest. When Darius says the whole family, it means they've already decided. I'm just there to sign what they drafted. The Houston afternoon was muggy, golden light spilling over a red brick street that led to a luxury complex called the Monarch Towers. I drove the old Ford F-150, the engine's heavy rumble drowning the radio. Outside, the lineup gleamed. Lexus, BMW, Range Rover. I parked in the guest lane, feeling like a man out of time. A guard in a black suit nodded, glanced at my crumpled valet ticket, then politely waved me in. The lobby smelled like perfume. Marble floors made me think of shareholder meetings long ago. The only difference, now I was playing the part of the old father visiting his successful son. Darius lived on the 21st floor. When the door opened, it looked like a magazine spread. Italian leather, crystal pendants, shining wood floors. My oldest son stepped out, shirt buttoned to the collar, slacks pressed. "Dad, you made it," he said, with a hint of pity. "Yeah," I answered. "Nice place." "Thanks." The three of us split the rent easier to work together. Inside, Marcus and Elliot sat around a glass table. In the center was a stack of glossy brochures, Sunset Pines Senior Living. I knew it at once. A nursing home. Darius offered me a seat, his tone smooth and professional. "Dad, we think it's time you lived more comfortably. With care. With peers your own age. Sunset Pines is only $650 a month and has gardens and a reading room," Marcus added with a thin smile. "You wouldn't have to cook or clean. At your age, let other people handle things." Elliot opened his laptop and pulled up a PowerPoint. Yes, a PowerPoint. "We compared costs," he said, not joking. "Right now, you spend more than $900 a month on utilities, insurance, and food. At Sunset Pines, everything's bundled for $650. Add healthcare and extras up to 30% savings." I stared at them. They were pitching me like a cost-cutting project. I was the line item to optimize. "Dad, you've been lonely too long," Darius continued, voice firm, like a commander. "We just want what's best." "We'll still visit," I asked slowly, keeping my tone even. "And your mother's house, what about that?" Marcus glanced at Elliot and said, "If you're not living there, why? Keep it? The market's around $700,000. Sell it, split it 3 ways fair to the family. You can keep a small portion for expenses, to make life easier." "Fair to the family," Darius echoed, smirking. I held the edge of the cold glass table. "You really think that's where I should end up?" I looked straight at Darius. He shrugged, voice flat like reading a budget. "Not should, Dad. It's just realistic." Elliot nodded. "At your age, the best thing is to accept the truth. Everyone needs care." Silence hung for a few seconds. I breathed in, forcing a smile. "You make some points. I need to think. Let me take these brochures home." "Of course," Darius said, relieved like he'd closed a deal. "If you agree, I'll contact them." I stood, brochures in hand. Late sunlight washed over their young, confident, and completely unfamiliar faces. I nodded and left, escorted by polite goodbyes. On the drive home, a misty rain began. I pulled over and opened the brochure. The pictures were perfect: smiling seniors at lunch, sunny gardens, bright yoga rooms. Under each photo, "Where aging feels lighter," I snorted. "Sure, lighter, because there's nothing left to carry." Back home, I hung my raincoat, kicked off my shoes, and headed straight to the office. The desk lamp cast a warm circle on the wood. I opened our old wedding album, staring into Ariel's gentle eyes. "Ariel," I whispered, "it's time to stop pretending to be poor." I knelt, pulled back the rug, and lifted the floor hatch. The hinge squeaked, revealing a small safe. I slid in the key and turned. The door clicked. Old metal and paper smell drifted out. Inside was a thick file stamped with the Crownstone Group logo, Northbridge Holdings seal in raised silver. Under the lamp, it gleamed a reminder of years of sweat and strategy. I flipped the first page. Share lists, lease contracts, board minutes. Every signature was mine. Langston E. Cole, chairman of Northbridge Holdings. 20 years I'd kept it under dust and silence. No reason to be quiet anymore. I set the file on the desk and placed Ariel's photo on top. "I kept your word," I said softly. "But I think I was wrong. I thought hiding money would teach humility. Turns out, I taught them to disrespect the truth." I opened my old computer and logged into the encrypted email. 2. Julian Ward subject, family audit. I need all time clock logs, travel and expense charges, and off-site meeting schedules for 3 employees: Darius Cole, Marcus Cole, Elliot Cole. Period. Last 12 months. Do not expose sources. Deadline, 72 hours. Send. I leaned back. Rain on the porch mixed with the tick of the wall clock. I opened my paper calendar and scrawled. Monday, 10 o'clock a.m. Tour Sunset Pines. Tuesday, 9 o'clock a.m. Emergency meeting at Northbridge HQ. I set down the pen and smiled. If they want to optimize Dad's future, Dad has a plan of his own starting tomorrow. Streetlight glow pooled on the desk. I closed the Sunset Pines brochure and laid it beside the Crownstone file. One was where they wanted to bury me, the other was where I'd make them kneel. And that night, with Texas thunder rolling far off, I saw it clearer than ever. The family negotiation was over. The father's audit had just begun. On Monday, rain fell from dawn. I sat in the truck outside Sunset Pines, watching through wet glass. A few elders sat quietly on the porch with plastic cups in their hands, eyes fixed on a distance that would never come closer. They looked like ships anchored forever. No voyages left. I didn't get out. Seeing that much was enough to know I'd never dock there. On the way back, I called Julian. "Do you have what I need yet?" "Almost." "But Langston, are you sure you want to go this far?" "I'm not going far, Julian. I'm tracing the road I paved." "All right. Be careful. What you're about to see will hurt." I gave a thin laugh. "You forget? My heart broke last Saturday night." That afternoon, I stopped by Crownstone's office as Mr. Langston Darius's father. A tall glass building, cold, and no one noticed the old man in a gray coat crossing the lobby. I used the excuse of bringing him a car key and called Darius down. "Dad, I'm in a meeting." "Just a minute. You left the key in the car." He sighed, checked his watch, and walked with me to the garage. I popped the trunk and pretended to dig around. "Got a phone charger?" "Mine just died." "Yeah, here." I plugged in, connected my phone to his car outlet. Within 40 seconds, the Family Link tracker was installed and hidden on Darius's phone. "All set." "Thanks, son." "You always forget to charge." He laughed. "Yeah, old man problems," I said. But inside I thought, sometimes old men still know how to slip a tiny chip into the outlet of truth. That night, a map lit up on my laptop. A green dot moving steadily from Darius's house to the office, then curving west across the city. I opened an activity log, the kind I once used to track projects. 8:47 a.m. departure. 9:32 arrives at the office. 11:15 leaves the building. 11:45 a.m. arrived at the Galleria Residences. a luxury apartment complex in West Houston. Time there, 2 hours and 12 minutes. 2:05 p.m. Back to the office. 5:02 p.m. Left the company for home. 3 days of tracking, the schedule repeated like clockwork. Client meetings, Darius said. But every coordinate pointed to the same place, the 14th floor unit at the Galleria. Meanwhile, Julian sent me the files on Marcus and Elliot. I opened each one, reading slowly like peeling back layers of the truth. Marcus accounting, in charge of internal spending. Over 6 months, his company card was swiped 79 times outside work scope, the gas station near home, a pharmacy, and 2 family restaurants. Each expense coded as client entertainment. I zoomed in on the statement images. $183.90 Olive Garden, $47.25, CVS Pharmacy, $69.40 Shell gas station. I sighed. Gas and cold medicine can count as entertainment, son. Elliot in-house counsel. For 5 straight months he booked client meetings at the same address, Lone Star Physical Therapy Center. That's where his wife has been getting shoulder treatment. Each meeting lasted 2 to 3 hours, matching her therapy schedule. No record shows any real client. Julian's note at the end of the report. All 3 are performing below average. No major fraud detected, but there are clear signs of privilege abuse. Privilege, I repeated, my voice cold as stone. Yes, privilege, the very thing I accidentally granted when I taught them they could look down on others without paying a price. The next morning, I called each one, probing like a worried old father. "Have you been busy lately?" I asked Darius. "Pretty flexible, Dad," he said. "My role lets me adjust hours as long as results are good." "Results, huh?" I looked at the performance chart. Darius Cole's 74% average productivity. "What about Marcus?" "Accounting hours are loose, Dad," he chuckled. "I handle most stuff online. If I need something, I just swipe the card and it's done." I wrote in my notebook, "Swipe the card and it's done." "Elliot, you must work more than your brothers, right?" "I'm different. Out meeting clients all the time. The company's expanding contracts. It's tiring." "I see," I said. "Sounds like you're working hard." But in my head, I saw him sitting in the therapy waiting room, scrolling his phone, waiting for his wife. I hung up and sat still. Their voices held no caution, no suspicion. In their world, Dad was still the clueless old man with the beat-up truck and discount card. The confidence of the careless is always a gift to the patient. By Wednesday afternoon, I went to the Crownstone building. Not to see anyone, just to watch. I sat in the cafe across the street, its window looking straight onto the employee lot. 9:10 a.m. Darius finally arrived, coffee in hand, unhurried. 11:30, his car pulled out. 2:15, he came back. Marcus showed up more than 20 minutes late. When he left, he carried a takeout bag. Elliot came at 9 o'clock sharp, but left at 10:45. I asked an old friend, Ernest the garage security guard at Crownstone, to pull the RFID swipe times for all 3. Ernest used to work for me back when we built Northbridge Plaza. Loyal, quiet. Just log their in and out times, nothing else, I told him. Ernest nodded. Got it. Mr. Langston, you're the same as ever look calm but always prepping a storm. 2 days later, Ernest sent me an exported Excel file, check-in and check-out columns down to the minute. I overlaid those times with their meeting calendars, a perfect chain of contradictions. 11 o'clock, regional strategy meeting checkout at 10:55. 3 o'clock, meet partner in guest suite check-in at 4:10. Not once, but dozens of repeats. I gathered statements too. The receptionist remembered Darius often slipped out early to meet important partners. A janitor said Marcus was rarely in his office, more than 5 hours a day, and the basement guard confirmed Elliot came and went for medical reasons. I recorded every small word and filed it under a folder labeled Case Crownstone Coal. On the last night of collection, I reheated the old pot of gumbo, the same dish I had made to celebrate their promotions. Cajun pepper, onions, and shrimp filled the air, stinging my eyes. I stirred and reread every report, every timestamp, every receipt. Everything lined up like a perfect equation. Darius time fraud, an affair, Marcus misuse of company assets, Elliot fake client meetings to sit with his wife. All three the talented manager's crownstone had just praised didn't even meet the average bar for new hires. I sat at the table and opened Case Crownstone Coal on the screen. More than 80 files, photos, recordings, statements, RFID data, location logs. Everything stacked neatly like a white-collar case file. I put my hand on the mouse, hovered over Save As, and renamed the folder The Last Lesson. In the small kitchen, the clock struck midnight. I ladled a spoon of gumbo, blew on the steam, and tasted it. The heat hit my tongue, and somehow I felt oddly calm. For 20 years, I'd lived like a patient father, believing love could sand down arrogance. But tonight, as the spices mixed with my breath, I understood. Love isn't endless shelter. Sometimes love is teaching someone the price of a mistake. I looked at Ariel's photo on the shelf. "See?" I whispered. "I'm keeping my promise. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm bringing justice back home." And in that quiet night, in the old house, there was only the soft click of the pot lid and the rain tapping the porch sounds, marking the start of my last day as a silent father. Monday morning, the skies finally cleared after days of rain. Darius picked me up in a brand new SUV, leather smell still fresh like it just left the showroom. He smiled lightly, opened the door for me, polite to the point of distant. "Let's go, Dad. I already booked it. They have a special tour today." I nodded, climbed in, gripping the handle like I was bracing for a trip I knew I'd never want to take again. We drove past familiar blocks to the northern suburbs of Houston, where a sign read Sunset Pines Senior Living, set on open grounds ringed by white fencing and neatly trimmed lawns. From a distance, it looked like a summer resort. But once we parked, the sting of disinfectant mixed with harsh cleaner flooded the cabin and dried my throat. Inside the lobby, cold white neon lit a glossy tile floor. On blue upholstered chairs, a few elders sat still, eyes blank as the TV screens in front of them. The TVs were on, but no sound. A young staffer smiled warmly, voice even like she was reading a script. "Welcome, Mr. Cole. Welcome, Darius. Please follow me for the tour." She led us down a long hall, light glinting off the tiles, throwing muddled shadows. Every room looked the same. 2 single beds, a small dresser, a metal table, pale floral wallpaper. At the end, the model room, a preview of my future life. It smelled damp and cool. By the window, an elderly man hunched over, clutching a blanket, eyes glazed on the view outside. The staffer whispered, "This is Mr. Bennett, your roommate, if you choose the standard plan." I looked at Mr. Bennett, frail, hair thin to scalp. He didn't turn as we entered, just bounced his knee lightly, as if that one motion was all his life had left. I stepped to the window and looked out. Hedges trimmed into perfect squares, a gardener in green uniform, a face as blank as the over-shaped shrubs. Darius chuckled, trying to keep it light. "See, Dad? Clean, convenient. They've got a reading room and yoga classes for seniors." I asked, still staring outside. "What are the visiting hours?" I think 2 to 5 p.m. on weekends. 3 hours?" "Yes, but if you need me, I can come every other week. Marcus and Elliot can schedule too." I turned and locked eyes with my oldest. "Will you really come every week?" He smiled, but it couldn't hide the hesitation. "We'll try, Dad." Work's busy. In the white room, the AC hummed steady. A chill set, in not from temperature, but from the way people justify abandonment with soft words. I moved to the bed and touched the thin blanket. "All right," I said slowly. "Let me think. I knew you'd understand." Darius exhaled. We left the room and walked the long hallway back to the lobby. I noticed an old woman sitting near a sign that read, "Lunch 11:30, 12:30. Her hands shook as she lifted a plastic spoon of cold soup, eyes fixed on the wall like she was waiting for someone to step out of the past. Out at the car, Darius opened the door, cheerful. "I think this is the most stable option for you, cost and health." I smiled, light as air. Stable? For who, son? If it were you, sitting in that car hearing your own child say, "Let's take you somewhere more stable," how would you respond? Stay quiet, or finally say what you've never dared to say? Share honestly in the comments. Darius didn't answer, just smiled, turned on the radio, and drove toward downtown. On the way home, I watched familiar storefronts slide backward through the window, like chapters being erased from memory. Darius talked about work, a new project, and protecting the company's image for the future, never noticing my hand tightening at my side. I wasn't angry. A cool, precise clarity kept rising in me like a river right before it breaks its banks. Back at the house, Darius waved a quick goodbye, saying he'd call soon to discuss selling the house. I nodded, watching his SUV turn off my narrow street and disappear around the corner. The engine noise faded, leaving a heavy quiet. I hung my coat and went straight to the office. Our wedding photo of Ariel was still there, dark wood frame, tilted slightly left. I sat down, drew a breath, and said softly, "You see it, don't you? They've drafted my future like an insurance policy. I'm about to sign a different sentence for them." I opened my laptop and logged into Northbridge Holdings' internal system. The Cole admin account still worked. I'd never truly left the chair. I'd simply stepped into the shadows. I drafted an email to Julian Ward's subject, "Urgent board meeting request. Prepare an emergency meeting at Northbridge headquarters for Tuesday morning. Invite the Crownstone Group management team, plus everyone on the attached list. Do not disclose the agenda. I will preside." I hit send, then called Shonda, my former assistant. She'd been with Northbridge more than a decade. "Shonda, it's me, Langston." Her voice jumped, half joy, half moved. "My God, boss, it's been so long." "No time for nostalgia," I said, low and steady. "Book the main conference room, lock the guest list. Absolute confidentiality. You know what I mean?" "I do," Shonda said. "No one outside the executive floor will know." "But, sir, this is about family, isn't it? Everything I do, Shonda, begins with family." When I hung up, I sat still. Warm evening light poured through the window onto the desk where the emergency invitations were rolling out of the printer. Each page slid free with bold text: "Northbridge Holdings, Emergency Board Meeting Chair, Langston E. Cole time, 9 o'clock a.m. Tuesday location, main conference room, floor 16. I stacked them neatly, clipped the set. Then I opened a drawer and took out a black velvet box. Inside lay the black tie. I wore the day I buried Ariel, the only day I've ever felt truly weak. I smoothed the fabric and breathed in the old cloth. "I'll wear it again," I murmured, "to remember some things are gone forever and some things must end on time." I closed the box and slid it into my suit pocket. Wind picked up outside. Branches scraped the roof like a faraway heartbeat. I stood and looked around the familiar room where laughter once lived, where dishes clinked, where Ariel called the boys down for dinner. Now it was just me. But for the first time in years, solitude didn't scare me. It was the space I needed to write the ending to the story called Family. That night, in the old house, I set the stack of invitations on the desk, flicked the lamp brighter, and whispered, "Tomorrow, my sons will meet the man they forgot, not Dad Langston, but Langston E. Cole, chairman of Northbridge Holdings." Tuesday morning, I woke before sunrise. Houston was still under a veil of mist, streetlights glowing on rain puddles. The man in the mirror wasn't the lonely old neighbor anymore. He was someone else, the one my 3 sons had forgotten. I shaved carefully, each stroke scraping off a layer of time. I trimmed my hair, combed it tight like the early Northbridge years. From the closet, I chose the charcoal suit, the black tie from Ariel's funeral, and the gold-toned watch she gave me for our 20th anniversary. The hand still ticked, the crystal scratched. I touched it and said quietly, "Ariel, I need you today, not to soften me, to remind me to be firm." I stepped outside, locked the door, and drew a deep breath of morning air. It was cool, but my heart burned like a flame that had waited 2 decades to rise. Northbridge Holdings Tower rose over downtown. When the car stopped at the entrance, a guard opened the door and bowed. "Welcome back, Mr. Cole." I nodded. "Thanks. It's been a while." Inside, a giant glass logo reflected a silver line, Northbridge Holdings, built on honor. I felt pride and an ache. Honor. 2 syllables my sons had forgotten to spell. Floor 38, the executive boardroom. Shonda waited, crisp in a black suit, red stamped folders laid out. "Welcome back to your chair," she said, voice trembling slightly. "I never left it, Shonda," I answered. "I just let others try it on." I sat in the leather seat, the chair of the chairman. Beside it, my old L.E.C. mug from the early days. Strong black coffee scented the room. I opened the files one by one, reading slowly. Darius, time violations, 27 instances in 3 months. Marcus, personal spending on the company card, 79 instances. Elliot, false off-site reports, 14 instances. And dozens more administrative breaches. I stacked them, flagged the corners, underlined the lines I knew they couldn't deny. I wasn't a father reading letters anymore. I was an auditor reading charges. Julian knocked and stepped in. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready. Langston, they're your sons. Maybe talk as a family instead of an investigation." I looked up, calm but firm. "No, Julian. Today isn't about feelings. Today is about rules." He sighed. "I understand. But you know, this will change everything." "Exactly," I said. "That's the point." I signed the meeting summons Shonda had prepared. Emergency audit, mandatory attendance. 9 o'clock a.m. The glass-walled IHEAA boardroom glowed. The long table gleamed. Shonda checked the recorder, mics, display. Everything set. The door opened. 3 figures entered: Darius, Marcus, Elliot. At first, their faces showed curiosity. But when they saw me at the head of the table, the Northbridge logo blazing behind me, they froze. Darius spoke first. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I leaned back, fingers laced. My voice was low and steady, carrying through the room. "Sit down." They glanced at each other, hesitated, then pulled out chairs. The scrape sounded colder than the AC. I let a few seconds of silence pass. No one met my eyes. Then I began, not as a father, but as a CEO running a meeting. I, Langston E. Cole, chairman of the board of Northbridge Holdings, hereby open this emergency review regarding policy violations by 3 mid-level managers of Crownstone Group. Marcus gaped. Darius frowned. Elliot stammered, "Crownstone is owned by Northbridge?" I met their eyes, slow and clear. "Not only owned, I founded it. The company you're proud to work for was built by these hands. And for 20 years, I've watched from a distance until now." No one spoke. I nodded to Shonda. She brought up the big screen. Images and data rolled. Time logs, location pins, expense statements, entry cameras. All three faces went pale. On the screen, Employee Performance Audit Crownstone Group. I spoke crisp and even. This is not a family talk. This is a formal audit. It's on the record, recorded, and everything you say here goes into your file. There is no father and sons, only a leader and employees. Marcus started to rise. Darius held him down, eyes locked on me. Elliot stared at the table. Dad, this is… What? You've been tracking us? No, I said evenly. I've been tracking Crownstone Group. You landing in the sample is coincidence. Julian, seated at the opposite end, added, Mr. Cole, all data have been verified. There's no mistake. Numbers don't lie. Thank you, Julian, I said. Then to my sons, you told me once that work is about cutting costs, performance, and being realistic. Today, I'll show you reality when numbers reflect a person's ethics. I signaled to Shonda. A timeline chart appeared. This is the in and out log for Darius Cole, head of sales. 11:15 a.m. leaves the office. 11:45 a.m. arrives at the Galleria Residences. 2:05 p.m. returns. Repeats 3 straight days. No scheduled meetings in that window. Darius swallowed, eyes drifting. Marcus Cole, I continued. 79 company card swipes for personal spending from gas to cold medicine. All coded client entertainment. Didn't I teach you honesty in the books? Marcus said nothing, head down. Elliot Cole, I said slowly. In-house counsel, the one who should know procedures best. 5 months of client meetings at your wife's therapy clinic. Any contract signed there? Elliot's voice shook. Dad, I just wanted to be with her. She's in pain. I know, I cut in. But Crownstone doesn't pay for pity. It pays for results and responsibility. The room thickened. Only the projector's hum and a pen tapping broke the air. I looked at each of them, not angry, just a quiet, heavy disappointment. I opened my notebook to a fresh page. The review begins now. All statements will be recorded. And I pressed the record button. The red light blinked against 3 young men's faces, my sons, raised by a lifetime of labor. In that moment, I felt myself settle back into my rightful place, the builder, the accountable one, the man who ends what must end. The meeting had begun. And for the first time in 20 years, the truth in the Cole family stood under the light of justice, not mercy. The boardroom on 38 glowed cold. The ceiling lights bounced off the glass table onto 3 faces that once made me proud, now lowered, drained. I drew a long breath and opened the first file. We begin, I said, voice steady as a clock. No emotion, no excuses, just facts. I turned the first page, Darius Cole. Absent or late, 23% of total workdays. 5 networking meetings held at the same address, the Galleria Residences. No deal closed after any of those meetings. I turned the screen and projected it onto the wall. Screenshots of the location map, entry and exit times, stop durations. Everything was clear, no extra explanation needed. Darius clenched his hands, lips pressed tight, still trying to stay calm. Dad, I cut him off. In this room. Call me Mr. Cole. The air seemed to freeze. I moved to the second file. Marcus Cole. Total improper charges, $12,800. Includes personal gas, cold medicine, family meals, and 2 basketball tickets. All coded as client entertainment. The statement copies bear your signature. Marcus lowered his head, both hands shaking. I just thought, with a company this big, those little items. I don't care about the amount, Marcus, I interrupted. I care about principle. Greed isn't measured in numbers. It's measured by how people justify what they know is wrong. I opened the third file. Elliot Cole, in-house counsel. 72 hours per month logged as client meetings. All of them at Lone Star Physical Therapy Center where your wife is being treated. Do you know which policy you're violating? Elliot bowed his head, voice hoarse. Section 7.2, misusing work hours for personal purposes. Good, I said. At least you remember. The room went dead silent. I tapped my pen lightly on the table and looked at my three sons. You thought you were big enough, smart enough, important enough to teach others how to work. The first thing you lost was discipline. Shonda, standing behind me, quietly brought up the next slide. On the screen, a group chat titled Coal Bros, the thread Julian found in the internal security system. I read each line slowly, not skipping a word. Marcus, the old man's gotta be senile. Darius, put him in a nursing home so we can stop thinking about it. Elliot, call it a long-term investment saves on estate taxes. Marcus, haha, right. One ticket to Sunset Pines Holding. The air turned to lead. No one dared look at me. Only the low hum of the AC remained, steady as a strangled heartbeat. I didn't shout. I didn't slam the table. I just spoke softly enough to tip the whole room off its axis. You thought your father was foolish. Turns out I was only more patient than you imagined. I took 3 envelopes from the drawer and slid them forward. These are the official decisions. Each envelope bore the line, termination for cause. I enunciated every word. Crownstone Group, owned by Northbridge Holdings, does not retain employees who violate ethics. Inside are instructions for returning company property, surrendering credit cards, and repaying improper expenses. Marcus opened his envelope, hands trembling. Elliot swallowed hard, eyes red. Darius sat still, fists clenched white. The door opened. 2 security officers stepped in, bowing for instructions. Collect their access badges and prepare boxes for personal items at Crownstone, I said. Effective at the end of this meeting. Marcus shot to his feet. You won, didn't you? In the end, you won. I looked straight at him, my voice low and final. I'm not playing, Marcus. I'm teaching. The sentence fell like the last stone sealing a coffin of self-delusion. Elliot choked up. Dad, I just wanted to help my wife through a hard time. I didn't mean to cheat. Please give me a chance to explain. I pointed to the screen, where the policy clause was displayed. Any employee who violates the code of ethics for any personal reason incurs the same discipline as intentional misconduct. This is the rule you signed, I said. Reasons may differ, but the consequences are the same. Marcus dropped his head and broke into tears, words stumbling. What about family, Dad? We're family. I answered softly, eyes still on the file. Family doesn't exempt you from discipline. If I let you off because of blood, I'd betray the woman who taught me honesty, your mother. Darius threw his envelope onto the table, voice tight. You always think you're right. You never understood us. You hid who you were, played poor, tested us. You turned the family into an exam. I met his eyes, calm. No, Darius, you turned my love into a test. I only recorded the results. No one spoke. The room sank into silence, broken only by heavy breathing. I nodded to Shonda. Enter into the minutes. The review is concluded. The 2 guards stepped forward and opened the door. Please surrender your employee badges before leaving the building, one of them said. They stood, one by one. Darius looked back at me, eyes burning with anger and pain. Marcus walked slowly, wiping tears. Elliot was the quietest. He just dipped his head in a small bow before stepping out. The door closed, leaving me alone in the wide room. Their footsteps faded down the hall. In the glass wall, I saw their reflections moving toward the elevators. As the elevator doors slid shut, I saw 3 faces mirrored in the steel, 3 grown men paying the most expensive tuition of their lives. One paying with honor, one with tears, and the last with silence. I sat down, took off my glasses, and rubbed my brow. The boardroom was empty, scented only with cold coffee and sunlight pouring through the glass. Outside, the city roared on, unaware that a family had come apart in silence and that a father had just signed the heaviest judgment of his life, a fair one. My eyes settled on the chair across from me, still empty. I pictured Ariel sitting there, her gentle smile like always. "Do you see it?" I whispered. "I did the right thing, even if it hurts." I stood, loosened the black tie, and folded it neatly on the table. The chairman's chair remained where it had always been, formal, unyielding. I ran a hand along its back, cold, smooth, steady. There was no victory in my head, only the quiet of a man who had just finished the hardest lesson of his life, a lesson paid for with the bond between father and sons. I looked out through the glass as the sun climbed over the mirrored towers. Warm light washed the room, but inside I was still cold, because some lessons, once taught, leave no one in the mood to applaud. 3 weeks after that meeting, spring came to Houston. The gray rain was gone, replaced by warm wind and light across the streets I ran each morning. The storm in my life had passed too, and like any real storm, it left marks. I started by selling the poor man's house, the place where I'd lived quietly for 2 decades, playing the humble father, the quiet widower, the man who seemed left behind. The old house was listed at $1.15 million. I sold it at market price, no more, no less, and not split 3 ways like they once proposed. On signing day, I took one last look at the kitchen where Ariel cooked gumbo and the window where light fell on the chair she used for mending clothes. I left the old tea set, a few family photos, and a wooden plaque engraved with her words. "Home isn't a place, it's how you treat each other." I carried only one thing with me, the black velvet box with the tie, the one I wore the day she died, and the day I took back my honor. I transferred the entire sale amount straight into the Elders with Dignity Foundation account, the nonprofit I founded with Julian. A simple mission: build senior centers on dignity, not on cost. I placed the foundation office 1 floor below Northbridge, where light struck a new silver logo. No one should end where they are forgotten. My phone is quieter than it has ever been. No more midnight texts like, "You doing okay, Dad?" which we all knew meant, "Are you still alive and leaving anything?" No more fake check-ins like, "Need anything, Dad?" which usually came with, "Money's a little tight right now." Instead, I get emails from strangers, elders abandoned by their kids, employees once pushed around, people grateful a foundation showed up in time. I answer each message slowly, the way I used to write letters to Ariel when we were young. One afternoon, Julian stopped by. He shrugged off his jacket, tossed his keys onto the desk, and poured us coffee. "Have you read the market summary?" he asked. "I have." On the table lay a thick brief. Darius Cole, left Crownstone, moved to a small equipment firm in Dallas, salary nearly cut in half. Marcus Cole, opened a freelance tax service, revenue shaky, some months not enough to cover rent. Elliot Cole, working as an associate at a mid-tier firm, lost managerial authority but kept his license. Julian looked at me, voice gentle. "Do you regret it?" I sat for a moment and answered, slow as something long brewed. "I don't regret what's gone. I regret the 20 years I lived smaller only to learn that when you lower yourself long enough, people forget to look up." Julian nodded and said nothing. We sat in quiet, listening to the coffee maker drip. I slid back into old habits, morning runs, black coffee, project memos, no more roles to play, no more lies to maintain. Every breath, every heartbeat felt real. At the park, a few people recognized me and nodded. "Good morning, Mr. Cole." For the first time in years, I smiled back without feeling heavy. Northbridge no longer swallowed my whole life. I gave most of the day-to-day to Julian and Shonda. I spent my time building the first model home for elders with dignity. I wanted sunlight, the smell of baked goods and wooden chairs by windows so elders could watch the sun, not the wall. I wanted them to choose their meals, read the paper, and say no if they didn't want something. That's what my sons should have understood if they'd ever sat down and listened to their father as a person, not a burden. One afternoon, as the building neared completion, I stood in a long corridor where light spilled across freshly polished stone. Gentle sounds echoed light hammer taps, workers laughing, the scent of new paint. Julian walked by, grinning. "You know, this looks more like a hotel than a care home." "They deserve a place like this," I said. "Seniors don't need luxury, they need respect." He studied me for a moment and said softly, "You've changed, Langston." I smiled. "No, I just came back to who I am." That night, Houston's air turned damp. Rain clung to the window. I poured myself a bourbon, the kind Ariel liked to smell but never drank. I sat in my new living room, warm lamplight on her photo on the shelf. "See, Ariel?" I said, lifting the glass. I stopped forgiving at the expense of self-respect. I paused, voice rough but calm. "I'm not angry at the boys anymore. Everyone pays to grow up. Some pay with time, some with tears. They paid with a lesson no school can teach." I set the glass down, listening to the ice chime in the quiet room. Outside, the wind tapped the frame like Ariel's old knock when dinner was ready. I smiled and answered the invisible, "I know, dinner's waiting." I stood and turned off the light. The house settled into gentle dusk. No phone calls, no texts, no pretending. Only the sound of truth, something I spent 20 years winning back. And as the bourbon hit halfway, I knew I'd learned the last lesson of my life. Peace doesn't come from being forgiven. It comes from no longer pretending. Saturday evening, as Houston lit up, I heard a knock at the door. Not the rush of a courier or the polite tap of a stranger, but hesitant, unsure, like the knocker wasn't sure he should be there. I opened it. On the porch stood Jaden, 17, my grandson Darius's boy, taller than I remembered, narrow shoulders but steady, curls tumbling over his forehead. Under the streetlight I saw those eyes, same dark brown as his father's, but a different look, no swagger, no pride. Just honest shame. "Grandpa," he started, then faltered. "Come in," I said, opening the door. "Cold out there." We sat at the kitchen table. The coffee pot was still warm, its smell mixed with the soft tick of the wall clock. Jaden looked around as if memorizing everything. Maybe he hadn't been in this new house since it all happened. He finally breathed in, voice shaking. "Grandpa, I came to apologize." I kept quiet and watched. He went on, "That night at the party when Dad said those things to you, I laughed. Everyone laughed, so I laughed too. But that night, when I rewatched the clip Mom recorded, I realized you didn't say a word. You just sat there, quiet, and your eyes made me feel ashamed." I set my cup down and asked, steady, "Do you regret it because I'm wealthy or because I was hurt?" He looked up. "Because I hurt the person I love." I raised an eyebrow. "Your girlfriend." "I'm not talking about anyone else, Grandpa. I mean you." That answer kept me silent a few seconds. Not from surprise, but because I heard something rare in his voice, unguarded honesty. I looked into Jaden's eyes. No show, no buttering me up, no fishing for money. Just the true regret of a kid trying to understand dignity. I poured him warm milk and said softly, "You don't need to say more. Regret can't change the past, but it can fix the future. If you really mean it, do it, don't say it." He nodded and fell quiet. The next morning, I texted Julian a short note. "Set up internal scholarship code. 7A. Recipient, Jaden Cole. Conditions, weekend work at the Foundation's care center. Absolute confidentiality." Julian called back, low. "You trust the kid?" "I don't trust blood," I said. I trust eyes. A week later, Jaden started at the Elders with Dignity Center we just opened. No one knew he was my grandson. On paper, he was just a part-time volunteer logging meds and helping seniors with daily life. I didn't speak to him the first days. I wanted to watch, not manage. And I saw. He arrived earlier than scheduled. While other volunteers hunted for a selfie spot in their new uniforms, Jaden had his apron on and the med cart rolling down the hall. He bowed to each elder, asked small questions, and recorded each pill and time carefully. At lunch, while the kids ate burgers in the yard, he sat and read to Mrs. Helen, mostly blind now, pages from a classic novel. From the hallway window, I watched and heard his steady voice. And in that moment she realized that kindness was the only wealth that couldn't be stolen. No photos, no posts, no hashtag volunteer life. Just the quiet of someone actually doing the work. Time passed. 3 months, then 4. Jaden didn't tell anyone about the center, not his mother, not friends. Only the chief physician sent me a monthly note. The boy is reliable, doesn't need to be told twice, not afraid of tough jobs. Seems to be carrying something he wants to make right, but he does it through actions, not words. Reading that line, my throat tightened. Maybe it had simply been too long since I'd seen a Cole feel shame the right way. On a Friday afternoon, the center hosted a charity volleyball game between staff and the still spry elders. I hadn't planned to go, but Shonda texted, "You should come. There's something you'll want to see." When I arrived, the back court was washed in gold. Laughter, cheers, the ball arcing over the net and Jaden in the middle of it, white uniform dusty with sand, helping Mr. Frank catch a falling ball. He grinned so open and bright that my chest eased. No cold boardrooms, no excuses, no repayment memos, just a grandson relearning decency from scratch. When the game ended, I didn't call him over. I just texted, "When you feel you've earned it, call me Grandpa. For now, stick with Mr. Cole." Minutes later, my phone buzzed. Jaden. "Yes, Mr. Cole. I'll prove it not with words, with work." I read it and didn't reply. I looked up at the Houston sky, warm gold, like the day Ariel led me to the back porch and said, "Someday, if you can't believe in grown-ups, believe in the kids." I smiled, closed the phone, hands loosely clasped behind me. Maybe my family had broken, but a green shoot had sprung from neglected ground. A breeze mixed grass with sun. Jaden jogged past, waved, sweat bright on his forehead. I nodded, saying nothing. Sometimes redemption doesn't need forgiveness. It just needs someone patient enough to replant the seed called decency. And that afternoon, I knew. The coal line wasn't over. It was starting again from a boy who knocked on my door at night. One Monday morning, with Houston still wrapped in mist, Jaden showed up at my door holding a worn paper envelope with creased edges. He stood straight, face serious, like he'd been sent on a hard assignment. "Grandpa," he said softly, "Dad asked me to bring this, a handwritten letter." I looked at the envelope. "To Dad" was scrawled in the familiar hand I'd seen on birthday notes when he was small. The paper had yellowed, the ink slightly smeared sweat or tears. "I understand," I said. "Leave it there." Jaden set the letter on the table and stood still. "Did your dad tell you to say anything else?" "He just said, if you read it and don't want to answer, that's okay." I nodded and motioned for him to head out. I sat down and carefully opened the envelope. The smell of old paper mixed with coffee in the air. The first line shook, like he'd been crying while holding the pen. "Dad, I don't know where to start. Everything's a mess." Darius wrote that after Northbridge, no big firm would take him. For a short time, a friend got him into a small Dallas company, then he was laid off. His wife Caroline filed for separation, saying she couldn't handle living with a failure. The house was close to foreclosure, car note unpaid, and past school costs for Jaden still hanging over them. The tone of the letter swayed between remorse and blame. There was a part where he wrote, "I know I was wrong, but you're not innocent either. You pretended to be poor, you hid things from us, then suddenly used your power to punish us. Don't you think that punishment was too harsh? You destroyed an entire family." I stopped there. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. The steam was completely gone. I kept reading. "Now I've lost everything, Dad. But I want one thing back. The father I used to love. The man who taught me how to build bridges with bare hands. I'm not asking for money, not asking for a job. I'm just asking to see you like father and son used to." He signed it. "Your son, Darius." Not a single line about how I had heard, only long lists of what he had lost. I set the letter down and leaned back in my chair. Light from the window slanted across the wooden desk, washing over the slanted handwriting of a man who'd lost his way. I read it again. Then again. By the third time, I knew I wouldn't cry. Because the tears had already run out over the years, I waited for a sincere apology that never came. That afternoon, I took a fresh sheet of paper and wrote a short reply, steady and final. "Darius, you have never truly wanted to understand who I am. I didn't hide from you to punish you. I hid to see whether you were decent enough to keep your character without knowing about money. In the end, you taught me something instead. Sometimes, love needs to know when to stop. If one day you truly want to talk, not to defend yourself, but to listen, this door will still be open. But I won't knock again." I folded it, slipped it into an envelope, and sealed it. That evening, Jaden stopped by. I handed him the letter and said, "You're to deliver this only if your father asks for it himself. Don't be a courier for someone's impulsive feelings. When a person doesn't truly want to understand, explanations are just wind blowing past a window." Jaden nodded, his voice low. "Yes, Grandpa." Time passed. Summer came, bringing the buzz of cicadas and a season full of graduations. Our care center received an invitation to Jaden's ceremony. He was being honored as a student volunteer for community service. I went and sat in the last row, quietly, like any other audience member. On stage, Jaden wore a green gown, his mortarboard tilted slightly. When he took his diploma, I saw a quiet pride in his eyes. No need for applause, no need for a post online. Then I saw Darius. He stood farther away, across the auditorium. His hair was graying, his face drawn thin. When our eyes met, he froze. We both stayed silent. No tears, no hug, just a small nod like two strangers keeping the last bit of courtesy. After the ceremony, Jaden found me in the courtyard. In his hand was the admission letter. "Grandpa," he said, eyes bright, "I got into the state medical school. The foundation scholarship stays the same, but I'll have weekend shifts at the center." I nodded. "Good. You'll be tired." "I'm not afraid." He went quiet for a moment, then added in a steady voice, "I'm not asking for anything for Dad, Grandpa. You face what you do." I set my hand on his shoulder and gave it a light squeeze. No other words were needed. In that moment, the grandfather in me woke up again, not from pride, but from hope. A child had understood what the generation before him lost. And maybe that alone was enough for this family line to stand up straight again. On the drive home, Houston suddenly broke into rain. Big, heavy drops, warm like summer breath. I didn't turn on the wipers. I let each bead run down the glass, blurring the buildings slipping behind me. Streetlights reflected in the water, streaking orange and gold like memories bent out of shape. I thought of Ariel. If she were still here, she'd probably smile and say, "You did the right thing, Langston. Raise kids with rules, and you may lose them, but teach with consequences, and you might save your grandchild." I let out a small laugh, even as my throat tightened. Outside, the rain fell steady. The engine hum blended with jazz on the radio. Everything faded, leaving only a lightness. The rare kind that doesn't come from winning, but from finally letting go without resentment. I adjusted the rearview mirror. In it, I saw myself older, but at peace. The glass was fogged with rain, but my heart was clearer than ever. Because after everything, I knew. The storm of my life had passed, and what remained was enough to rest. Thursday morning, the Northbridge office was quieter than usual. Houston's sunlight poured through the big pane of glass, spreading over the polished stone floor like a lake. I was reviewing the foundation's monthly report when Shonda knocked, her voice cautious. "Mr. Langston, someone's here to see you. No appointment." "What's the name?" I asked without looking up. She hesitated. "Elliot Cole." The name echoed like a voice from the past. I set my pen down and looked up. "Send him in," I said evenly. "And no coffee." The door opened. Elliot walked in. I almost didn't recognize my son. He was much thinner, sallow, eyes hollow like months of poor sleep. His suit was wrinkled, collar a bit worn, shoes unpolished. But it was the slow, humble way he moved that told me the man in front of me wasn't the Elliot from 2 years ago. He stopped a few steps away and didn't rush to speak. I didn't either. We just looked at each other and let the silence do the talking. Finally, he drew a breath, voice hoarse but clear. "I'm not asking for anything, Dad. I mean, Mr. Cole. I'm here to apologize." I looked straight at him. "Apologize for what?" He let out a thin, self-mocking smile. "For thinking I was grown while acting like a spoiled kid. For forgetting that working to live isn't the same as living off privilege." He paused, then spoke slower, weighing each word. "Over the last 2 years, I finally learned what it means to work to earn a paycheck, not to be treated special. Without the Cole name to lean on, I had to prove myself every day. I failed a few times, but at least now I know who I am." I leaned back and folded my arms. "And now what do you want from me?" Elliot shook his head. "Nothing. No position back, no inheritance, no money. I just want you to know, I've changed." He bowed his head and spoke softer. "Jaden told me something I can't forget." He said, "Love without respect is just habit. Back then, I cared about you, but it was habit, not respect. Now it's different." I stayed quiet for a long time. Not because I was emotional, but because I wanted to be sure I wasn't hearing it wrong. In front of me stood a man lowering himself not to be forgiven, but to be right. I reached for the pitcher, poured water, set the glass in front of him, and pointed to the chair across from me. "Sit." It was the first grace I'd given him since that day. We sat for over an hour, talking about things no one had touched in 2 years. No tears, no hugs, no pleading tone. Just 2 men speaking like former colleagues. I asked, "What are you doing now?" Elliot said, "Freelance legal counsel for a few small companies. Barely enough, but enough." "Good. When you've got just enough, that's when you learn to live decently." He smiled, a touch of ease in his eyes. "You know, when you said family doesn't exempt you from discipline, I was furious. I thought you were cruel. Now I'm grateful. If you hadn't done it, I'd never have understood what a real consequence is." He hesitated, then continued. "I've heard about elders with dignity from Jaden. I read some of the legal reports and realized the Foundation's legal framework could be stronger. I'm not asking for a job, but if you'll allow it, I'd like to offer 6 months of pro bono legal support. No title, no pay, just a contribution." I studied him for a long moment and saw no trace of the old arrogance, only a quiet push to do what's right. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I need to do something that matters." I nodded. "Good. Then we'll sign an agreement. 6 months. Clear scope, rules and confidentiality. Boundaries first, sentiment after. That's the principle." Elliot nodded hard. "I agree." I opened the drawer, took out an MOU template, filled in his name and the term, signed it, and pushed the pen to him. He signed. His hand shook a bit, but the strokes were steadier than I remembered. When he looked up, there was something in his eyes sad but bright. "Thank you, Mr. Cole." I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him to call me Dad. Not yet. When Elliot left, I stood by the window and looked out at Houston in the afternoon light. People and cars flowed by, as if no one out there knew that on the 38th floor, two people had just rewritten the meaning of the word redemption. I sat back down, opened my laptop, and typed an email to Julian. Subject: Update. Cole family. Julian. Maybe one of the three has learned the lesson. Elliot just came by, asked for nothing, offered 6 months of pro bono legal work for the foundation. I agreed, but kept the lines clear. I think Ariel would be proud today. L. I read it a few times before hitting send. Near dusk, I headed home. Outside, the sunset washed the neighborhood in pale orange. A light breeze carried the scent of magnolia over the white fence. I opened the gate and walked the stone path to the porch. In the living room, our wedding photo still stood there, the old wooden frame I polish every week. I sat down, poured a little bourbon, and let my voice settle into the quiet. Ariel, do you see it? One of the three came back, and this time, the right way. I leaned back and closed my eyes. No anger, no hurt. Just the calm of a father who finally sees a seed he planted sprouting again, even if late. Outside, the streetlights flicked on. In the soft wind, I could almost hear Ariel laugh. "See, Langston, I told you. Some people do turn around." I smiled and set the glass down. Houston's night held still, and in that stillness, I wrote one simple line in my notebook. Not every lost child stays lost. If even one comes back the right way, it's enough to forgive a lifetime. When autumn returned to Houston, it was still warm, but the light had changed. It wasn't as harsh as the years I fought through meetings. It was gentler, like the kind of light that shows up only after a person learns how to let go. I looked back at my life and saw each mistake, each detour. I spent too many years confusing love with endurance. I once thought being a father meant unconditional sacrifice, silence to keep the peace, forgiveness without an apology. I was wrong. Love shouldn't be a burden called obligation, and family should never be a place where discipline doesn't apply. I relearned it late, but in time, respect isn't the final reward of love. It's the first condition. Without it, everything else is just habit or fear. Darius and Marcus still haven't found their way. I hear Darius is at a small construction firm, not making enough to feed the ego he once carried. Marcus lives off tax season. Some months he has clients, some months he doesn't. Both still write me now and then, asking if I'm well, slipping in a few lines hoping Dad can be like before. But that endlessly forgiving father died with the old pickup the night I decided to stop pretending to be poor. I'm not a protector anymore. I'm simply a father, the real kind who knows when to let go so his children can stand on their own. Elliot is different. He works clean, on time, without breaking his word. Over the past 6 months, he helped elders with dignity lock down the legal framework, standardize audits, and turn it into a model we can scale statewide. When Julian sent the final report, he added a short note. Elliot Cole pro bono. No missed deadlines. Didn't ask for credit. I didn't respond to the report. I typed one line, noted. Jaden keeps his weekend shifts. I see him through a hallway window whenever I check the center. White coat, collar damp with sweat, clipboard in hand, walking fast and light. He doesn't know I'm watching, and I don't need him to. Some things are meant to be seen, not to be noticed. I don't ask for reunion anymore. I don't need a crowded dinner or empty words like, Dad, you're everything. I ask for dignity, and now I have it. At the dedication of the new Elders with Dignity Center, I wore a charcoal suit and the watch Ariel gave me when I turned 50. The hall was full residents, staff, local press. On stage, when the mic came on, I looked out and said, "The day I stopped making myself small, I became a real father not for my children but for myself." I used to think love meant putting up with everything, but if you keep lowering yourself, love loses its voice. Today, I'm not here to teach anyone anything. I'm here to say, sometimes what needs saving isn't the family, it's your self-respect inside the love. The hall went quiet for a few seconds, then the applause rose not loud, but steady and sincere. I bowed my head and felt my heart settle. After the ceremony, I hung Ariel's photo in the main lobby right beneath a silver line of letters, "Love but never lower yourself." The picture was taken when she was 45, eyes gentle but unwavering. I touched the glass and said softly, "Ariel, do you see? We lost almost everything to keep what mattered most." Toward evening, I walked out onto the center's porch. A warm wind drifted up from Galveston Bay, carrying a hint of salt. The magnolia trees swayed, white petals drifting onto the brick path. People were laughing inside. A radio somewhere played an old jazz tune, "What a Wonderful World." I smiled. Today, I chose to be with the people who also choose to be with me. Not because of their blood, not out of obligation, but out of mutual respect. If you're still here, thank you for staying with me to the very last line of this story. Not everyone has the patience to listen to the journey of an old man in Houston, someone who once lost himself in love, then learned how to love again without bowing his head. I don't know where you're listening from, maybe a noisy city, maybe a quiet little home. But if this story makes you think of someone in your life, tell them this: love is respect. Because in the end, what keeps us together isn't blood, it's kindness and respect. Leave me a comment, tell me where you're listening from on this map. And if this story touched your heart, a like, a share, or a small subscribe is enough to let me know you still believe in those values. Thank you for staying and for listening with your whole heart. I'll see you in the next story where we keep talking about love, self-respect, and the belief that it's never too late to start over.